The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 49. Incarcerate and Insensate. All around him, cracks of apparition rent the chilly night air of the forbidden forest. His fighters were regrouping, and Voldemort began taking stock of who had returned from amongst his most loyal supporters. Rabistan was first, followed by Roll and McNair. Avery, Knott, Crabbe, and Goyle. In quick order 12 more appeared. Lucius and Richard came together with Lucius's wife. Gibbon came last. But Bellatrix, where was she? And Pettigrew? He had expected the two of them to arrive first. Had something happened to them? Now that he looked properly, there were several missing. The young Jugson who had worked with Richard, Yaxley, Snape, the Carrows. Had all of them fallen? Voldemort knew that amongst his most loyal were Bellatrix and Wormtail. It was ominous that the two of them were missing. Surely they had not been lost in the fighting, he fretted. But it was inevitable that some would die. It could not be him, that much he knew. So long as it was not Nagini, all was well.
"We supposed to be going to meet him, Lecto. We're going to be knee-deep in shit if we don't go."
Amicus Carrow waddled after his taller and slightly less rotund sister, sniffling as he went. They'd just encountered a venomous tentacula that some tosser had left in the corridor outside the 4th floor restrooms where they'd been hiding, and he was allergic. Particularly when this very same plant was trying to crawl down his throat and choke him to death.
"Your gab hole is only good for cleaning off dishes and polishing knobs, so why don't you shut it, Amicus?" His sister tossed over her shoulder. "We're going as soon as I say we're going, and I'm not going until I find that little shit stain that put that plant there. I know it was that Longbottom wanker."
A shadow passed just outside of Amicus's vision. Someone was lurking down the corridor. He shuffled to move even closer to Alecto.
"Get your filthy boots off my frock, you useless pile of mange!"
Alecto shoved him backwards, sending him ass cheeks over elbows.
"Lecto, something was back there!"
Amicus yelled from the floor.
"Well, why didn't you stun it? Why didn't you stun it, you daft bit?" he grumbled,
pushing himself up to his feet. Alecto shoved him again with her boot heel, setting off a fresh round of rabble-rousing. "Because neither of you are worth shit at curses," an unruffled witch's voice said from behind them. Both heads whipped around to see Pansy Parkinson and Neville Longbottom, both their wands trained on the siblings.
"What the hell do you know, you stupid bitch?" Amicus said with a sneer. "I've seen you try and fail at curses all year."
Pansy fixed him with a look of disdain. "The fact that you didn't know we were only pretending to fail proves my point precisely." Without another word, she shot a non-verbal incarcerous curse at the two of them. Amicus, on the ground, was immediately bound, but Alecto jumped sideways out of the path of the spell, her wand casting wildly. Pansy was hit with a bombarda and flew backwards. "Pansy!" Neville yelled. He shot a slicing hex at the Carrow sister, but it glanced off her. Then he rushed to check on Pansy. Alecto bore down on the young couple, challenging his shield charm as she came. "Confringo!" A powerful older witch's voice rang out from the space in which Amicus had spotted movement earlier. The Bombardier hex obscured the woman's features from the 4 of them, but one of the 4 of them knew exactly who it was, without any shadow of doubt in his mind. There was a whoosh and a nearby plinth crumbled into hundreds of large, jagged pebbles. "Opugno!" the voice called again, and Neville threw himself over the nearly unconscious Pansy to shield her from any fallout. His grandmother's charm work, however, had improved greatly since her Hogwarts days. It cut precisely through the air, and the pebbles pelted down furiously, only on the Carrows. When he looked over his shoulder at the fight between the Carrows and Augusta Longbottom, it was hardly a fight at all. The bloodied Alecto was straining against the tight bindings that had shot from Augusta's wand, and the wands of the sister and brother were held in Augusta's outstretched hand. Next to him, Pansy sat up, dazed. "It's my Gran," Neville said in quiet relief.
"No, I'm Pansy,"
the young witch mumbled sarcastically, touching her head gingerly. Neville laughed. He performed a quick diagnostic charm. Pansy was bruised and scratched, but otherwise okay. He gathered her in his arms, pulling her close against him, creating a bit of space between them only to kiss her face and neck fiercely. "You're all right," he said, as though to reassure himself.
"I'm fine, Nev. Give me a minute, yeah? I'm about to meet your grandmother for the first time, and my blouse is torn half off," Pansy said primly. They stood and dusted themselves off. They approached Augusta to see her checking the bindings on the two Carrows. She turned to the young couple, snapping the two confiscated wands. "You're both unhurt?" the older witch asked. "Yeah, Gran, we're fine. Thanks for asking," Neville answered. "Thanks for your help." "Of course," the imposing witch said. "Fine work with the plants back there, my boy." Neville blushed at the praise. "I appreciate it." Augusta pushed her wand into her oversized red handbag and dusted off her hands briskly. She pushed her glasses up her nose wondrously and peered in a not unfriendly way at Pansy. "So, this is the girl, is it, Neville?" Yes, Gran." Neville cleared his throat and stood a bit straighter. "Yes, this is Pansy Parkinson." "Yes, I knew your grandmother, Laurel Burke. We were in school together. She was a Ravenclaw, poor thing," Augusta said, as though Laurel had contracted a mildly irritating case of doxy fever. Pansy clamped her lips together to avoid laughing. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Longbottom. Thank you for your help." "Not at all. Well, if you're both all right, I'm off. I promised Minerva we'd fight together when the time came." Augusta drew them both into a quick but perfunctory hug. "Stun them before you go, all right, Neville?" She pointed to the bound Carrows. "Will do," he said confidently. The young witch and wizard stood arm in arm to watch her go, then took aim with their wands at the Carrows with barely suppressed glee. Augusta trotted as quickly and stealthily as her arthritic knees would allow down the staircase to the next floor. She was in her element, on the offensive where she belonged. From the corner of her eye, a silver wink caught her gaze. She turned and doubled back, withdrawing the familiar sword of Gryffindor by its hilt. "Hello, old friend," she smiled, opening her undetectably extended red handbag and pushing the sword carefully inside. The missing ones were most certainly dead, he thought. Large gaps in the stalwart circle of his soldiers mocked him. But no matter. In the end, it was only his prodigious skill, his ability to defeat Potter, that mattered. "What time is it?" he called quietly into the darkness. "Midnight, my lord," Lucius said softly. "Exactly midnight?" he asked, ever the peevish, seldom satisfied toddler. Lucius squinted more closely at his pocket watch in the dark, turning it towards his Lumos wand ineffectively.
Richard pressed a button on his Timex Indiglo. 12:02, cousin?
He should be here by now, Voldemort said, in a plaintive voice.
He gripped his wand of yew and phoenix feather tightly in his right hand, whilst in his left robe pocket he lightly fingered the other wand, the special one. Where was Harry Potter? The twigs barely crunched under his feet as he stepped. The forest was missing its usual sounds of owls hooting, animals scurrying for cover, trees swaying in the harsh spring Highlands wind. Instead, there was an occasional low, mournful note. Was that a saxophone? Harry tilted his head, momentarily confused. But no matter. He had a task, a final mission to carry out. Already he felt closer to dead than alive in the tomb-like silence of the forest, minus the saxophone. Would this be what it was like to die? Silence. Darkness. Would there be a golden light, or harp music? Harry stopped to listen. Yes, that was definitely harp music. His breath tore from his throat, the cool spring evening so peaceful compared to the dueling storms in his heart and his head. Suddenly he remembered Dumbledore's words. The ring. This would be the moment, then. Opening his bag, he took out the ring, turning it in his hand 3 times. A vision appeared before him, achingly similar to the one he had seen in the mirror of Erised so many years before. His mother and father, but no longer 2-dimensional, no longer silent. Harry, you've been so brave. The assembled Death Eaters stood waiting in silence. Richard was more than a bit displeased to see that they had been joined by several snatchers, including the hulking, toothsome werewolf, Fenrir Greyback. He'd sincerely hoped never to encounter that particular man again. Richard silently counted the seconds, wondering if the boy would show up. If the stories that Hermione had told him were true, he had no doubt that the Potter boy would eventually appear. His mind wandered back to a meeting he'd had days before, knowing that this time was likely drawing close. Narcissa had brought him and Linda to the doorstep of 12 Grimmauld Place, after Richard had shown her the parchment upon which the address had been written. Narcissa was full of memories of the place. She had had to visit as a child, hosted by the deranged and raving Walburga at the insistence of her mother. None of the memories were pleasant. But their visit today was to discuss the future, not the past.
Many years ago, Harry's mother sacrificed her own life to protect his, Dumbledore explained. That meant that throughout his childhood, he had her blood protection keeping him safe. Voldemort knew about this old magic, but he always discounted it as a fool's magic. Dumbledore continued. I had assumed that Voldemort would have tried to take Harry's blood to revive himself, thereby attempting to steal that magical protection for himself. However, he chose a different enemy for the spell, namely myself. This means that Harry will be unprotected if they are to meet face to face. It will be up to us, up to you, to protect him when the time comes.
And so now, as they stood in the darkened forest, Richard readied himself. Earlier in the evening, whilst waiting for news back at the Three Broomsticks, he had withdrawn the small packet that Linda had passed him back at their home in Hampstead. He'd broken open the packaging carefully, and removed one small glass cylinder from its packaging. He had meticulously loaded the cylinder into his own McDonald's straw. Now, here in the forest, he had carefully uncapped the end of the cylinder, and had concealed the straw in his hand, held tightly against his wrist, mindful not to prick his skin with the minuscule needle.
"He should be here by now,"
bleated the high, miffed voice of Voldemort. There was a sudden rustling and flapping of fabric in front of them. "I am here," Potter's voice said, and a moment later the boy swam into view, his cloak of invisibility thrown off. Everyone in the circle, with the exception of 2 people, gaped at the wizard, agog. It was time. With quick, furtive movements, Richard lifted the straw to his mouth at the same time that he inhaled deeply. As the straw reached his lips, he took careful aim at the gaunt, grey cheek of Voldemort. He blew hard. As the tiny dart of lidocaine sailed to its target, Narcissa slid her eyes to the right, watching it pierce its mark. Magically, she pushed the plunger, dispersing the liquid throughout the jaw of the Dark Lord. With the final wave of her hand, "Evanesco," the needle vanished. The glint of Richard's indigo watch, its face turned inward in his wrist, briefly lit the syringe as it flew. Thankfully, the only eyes that noticed it belonged to Lucius. Voldemort crumpled to his knees, his hand cupped to his cheek. "What was that?" "What was what, my lord?" Lucius asked, eyes wide. Did Richard Granger just kill the Dark Lord that easily?" But no. The red eyes were still alert, staring about in confusion.
"I don't know. Something feels off,"
Voldemort said, panicking at the strange, numb sensation that was overcoming his face and tongue. As he tried to press his lips to his teeth to form the F sound, spittle flew everywhere. Lucius looked up, meeting his wife's eyes. He had not missed the minuscule movement that her wand had made less than a second after Richard's projectile met its target. "An insect, perhaps. I have seen several buzzing about, my lord."
"Yes,"
Voldemort said, straightening up. He pushed away Lucius's concerned grip on his arm. The dark wizard's angry red gaze bore down on the boy in the center of the circle.
"Harry Potter, the boy who lived, come to why?"
Or, at least that was what he attempted to say. His words were garbled. His hard consonants came out with a soft, sibilant, sputtering sound. He raised his wand, his arm strong enough now to control the long, thin twig of yew, even as it preferred the supple hollowness of plastic.
"Ababa Cadabra!"
For a half-moment, nothing happened. Then, wide-eyed with panic, Lucius hunched his body slightly to shield his wand from the view of Lord Voldemort and the other Death Eaters to his sides. Pointing it surreptitiously towards Harry Potter, he murmured, "Cadras!" The tripping jinx instantly brought the scar-faced wizard to the floor of the Forbidden Forest, dropping him where he stood. Narcissa rushed forward, coming to stand between Voldemort and Potter. She knelt down, placing her hand on the boy's neck. She whispered almost silently, "Stay down and act dead."
"Is he dead?"
the high, struggling voice of Voldemort asked.
"He is dead, my lord,"
Narcissa called clearly to him. Voldemort raised his hands as though in victory, letting out a muffled grunt of success. The rest of the Death Eaters were silent, unsure of what exactly had happened, but taking Narcissa's word for it.
"We will go wreck Ruby Castle. We will bring the voice ready to show them. Lucius, whoever takes the void, let us go."
It took a few moments for the Death Eaters to catch up, owing to the fact that Voldemort had suddenly become so difficult to understand. Finally, however, the group began to move. Voldemort, Lucius, and Richard led the group in the front, with the somewhat limp body of Harry Potter floating before them. They trooped towards Hogwarts Castle, the apparent victors. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great78.